Good afternoon. I will present our work about a self-adaptively evolutionary screening approach for sepsis patients. This work is accomplished by the group of Department of Computer Science, University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. This is the outline of my presentation. First, I introduce the motivation why we do some sepsis early warning. And then I will present some background about the sepsis definition and the dynamic Bayesian network. Based on the background, I will propose our approach, that self-adaptively dynamic Bayesian network for sepsis screening. And the experiment results and then conclusion will be presented finally. First, let's see the motivation. Sepsis is a life-threatening condition caused by an inappropriate immune response to infection. It is a leading cause of elderly deaths globally, and more than 750,000 cases occur annually in the United States, and the incidence continues to increase. From these statistics, we can see that sepsis is very common in elderly and very important for us to cover. For those patients, time to antibiotic administration is one of the most important predictors of survival in sepsis. From this picture, we can see that each time it grows, the survival rate will be reduced, and the best time window is the first 6 hours. Early detection will result in a higher survival rate. But what's the situation? Unfortunately, for those patients, it is often detected late because it is too expensive and impractical to perform frequent monitoring for all the elderly. When a patient comes in, you cannot do sepsis screening every time for every patient. Then, in order to shorten the time of onset detection for suspected patients, we present an ultimate risk-driven sepsis screening and monitoring framework. The key idea is that higher risk, higher frequency to monitor, lower risk, lower frequency for monitor, and this adaptive frequency is performed automatically. Let's see the proposed approach overview. From this part, you can see that when a patient comes in, its vital signs will be sampled by some medical devices such as sensors. Those sensors and data will be input into the adaptively dynamic Bayesian network for risk calculation. If the risk is low, then it will keep the same frequency for monitoring. If the risk is higher, then it will adapt the monitor guideline and adapt higher frequency for monitor, and more vital signs need to be sampled for a more accurate calculation. This is the overview of our approach. For our approach, we need to make clear definition of sepsis and the dynamic Bayesian network. Sepsis is an unchecked whole-body response to an infection, which produces at least two of the following four signs. For example, the abnormal body temperature, the tachycardia, and the tachypnea, or a rate sufficient to produce PaCO2, or the abnormal white blood cell count. If 2 cross the thresholds and the infection is confirmed, then sepsis is confirmed. If not treated timely, it will develop into severe sepsis. Severe sepsis is a sepsis plus one of the following clinical problems: cardiovascular system dysfunction, acute respiratory distress syndrome, and dysfunction of two or more other organs or systems. Furthermore, if severe sepsis is not treated timely, it will develop into septic shock in a patient with sepsis. It is acute circulatory failure with refractory hypertension that is unexplainable by other causes. What's our job? Our job is to detect the sepsis in an early stage and stop the patient from developing into severe sepsis and septic shock. We will make use of dynamic Bayesian network to get the risk result. Bayesian network is a directed probabilistic graphic model. Each node in the graph represents a random variable, and the arc between two nodes expresses the conditional probabilistic dependency between the two random variables. These three nodes denote the rain, sprinkler, and road wet, and the arcs denote the relationship between these three nodes. And this is the probability distribution of each value of the different nodes. For example, when the weather is rain and the sprinkler is on, then the road wet is 100%. This can be denoted by this arrow. And for others combinations, it will be read in these arrows. Then what is dynamic Bayesian network? Dynamic Bayesian network is a generalization of Bayesian network to address stochastic processes and handle temporal effects of random variables. This is the earthquake, this is a volcano, and this is a fire. When the volcano happens, then it is highly probability that fire will happen. And we can extend it to 3 time slices. For example, if today the volcano happens, then the fire is on. And for high probability that tomorrow the volcano is also on and the fire is on. This temporal relationship is captured by this dynamic Bayesian network. Then I will show our approach how to apply dynamic Bayesian network to model the sepsis and get the risk. First, we need to construct the Bayesian network and then extend it to dynamic Bayesian network, and later extend it to self-adaptively dynamic Bayesian network. First, we construct the node and get those arcs with the discussion of physicians. Sepsis is highly dependent on the age, the search engine, and the infection. The source is the temperature, heart rate, respiratory rate, and white blood count. And the infection, we can get the abdomen, the lung infection, the urinary infection, and others. We just present the most common cases here. Then we can extend it to 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or any number that you want. If you screen the patient today or tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, then you can unroll the Bayesian network to get the historical data and the historical effects on the current calculation. For example, the infection, if yesterday you have infection, it is highly possible that today you also have infection. If yesterday you have sepsis, then it is higher probability that today you will also have sepsis. Then after we get the graphic structure, we need to initialize those conditional probabilistic distribution. For example, given an old patient admitted to hospital for lung infection, what's the probability of this patient developing sepsis? We survey a lot of papers and the research dataset and get those probabilities to initialize. For example, this probability can be described by this conditional formula, and it can be extended to this formula by the Bayesian network theorem. And we can get those statistics from pathophysiological static survey. For example, the probability of lung infection for the population under study is 0.075, and for the all elderly people that have sepsis, we can get those statistics. For hospitalized patients over 85, the sepsis rate is 0.029, and for other ages, we can also get those kinds of statistics. Those kinds of statistics may be incorrect, but do not worry, this is just the initial probability. We can collect real patient data and then update those conditional probabilistic distribution for our calculation. And after that, we can get this kind of distribution and get the final probability. And with this probability, we can initialize the conditional probabilistic distribution table like this. Then with this table, we can calculate the final probability that the patient has sepsis with other facts in consideration. And after we construct the dynamic Bayesian network, we will extend the concept of dynamic Bayesian network to self-adaptively dynamic Bayesian network. As the word means, self-adaptively means that the dynamic Bayesian network will extend itself according to the sepsis patient status. For different states or status, the dynamic Bayesian network will unroll itself or reconstruct itself. These reconstruct rules are defined in our algorithms and predefined with the discussion of physicians. For example, in the initial status, you just need to screen the patient every 3 hours, and for the high risk status, you need to screen it for every 1.5 hours. And this is the model evaluation semantics, which is also the same as the model reconstruction rule. For example, when you get a self-adaptive dynamic Bayesian network, first, it will get the transition starting from the current active state or the patient state. Then it will sort the transition and get the active transition to be executed. If the execution is self-transition test and execution, first, it will unroll the graphic structure. It will extend the dynamic Bayesian network for one more time slice, and the previous statics will also be stored and will be considered in current calculation. If not, it is a non-self-transition test and execution. It will get the frequency of the next state and the current dynamic Bayesian network attached on the status, and then do calculation. This is the key idea of the self-adaptively dynamic Bayesian network. Its formal definition and formal rules can be referred to the paper. Based on the adaptive DBN, we can design some early warning workflow. When a patient comes in, it will do some low-cost sepsis screening with the assistant nurse operation. And those values, if it is sepsis likely, then our adaptive DBN-based screening will be triggered. We will read those values and the pathophysiological measurement and input it into our adaptive DBN. And then we will automatically evaluate it and get the risk result and output it to the physician for the decision. And if sepsis is confirmed, we will trigger the sepsis treatment and monitoring, which it is sepsis management screen. Based on this early warning workflow, loss of efforts of the physician or nurse can be saved by this self-adaptively evolutionary screening approach. and this financial problem will also be solved to some extent. And then let's see the experiments. We compare the efficiency of the proposed model with existing models such as the AutoBN, BN, DBN, and SCORE. There are many two types of sepsis cases. The first is that the patient comes with obvious sepsis symptoms, and the second is that the patient comes in with suspected sepsis symptoms and will be developed into sepsis in a few steps. We will generate semi-random data race for those patients, and we will calculate the delay of each detection. If the model produces a less delay time, then the model is efficiency and will produce better result to the timely antibiotic administration. From the table, we can see that the adaptive dynamic Bayesian network produce less delay time than the other four models for sepsis screening. This is mainly caused by the second data race. With the proposed model, we can adaptively adapt our dynamic Bayesian network and get the timely result. For conclusion, we propose a self-adaptive computation model for flexible medical knowledge presentation and inference. We hope that it can be applied to other kinds of sepsis, kinds of disease screening. Also, based on this model, we propose an intensive sepsis patient screening and monitor workflow, which may motivate the scientific community to use it to work on other problems. For our future work, first we will collect more real-time data to update our conditional probability distribution table to improve the accuracy of the adaptive DBN. Second, we will improve the accuracy of the model itself. We will integrate more risk factors for calculation. We will reach our dynamic Bayesian network model. Later, we will implement the computer-aided sepsis survival guidance. Thank you very much. If you have problems, send email to the email address. Thank you.